What is up? My name is Jesse. This is No Flippin' Secrets, and in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I closed my first wholesale deal straight out of high school. Let's get into it. Let me start from the beginning. All throughout high school, and even in the beginning of high school, starting freshman year, I always had a big passion, and that was real estate. My grand plan was to become a real estate agent and then eventually become a real estate investor. Didn't know how I was going to get there, didn't know where to start, but that was my goal nonetheless. My dad always wanted me to go to college, but I knew that that was something that I didn't want to do. I knew that I wanted to be more hands on and not writing notes and taking tests, and then eventually later on, after high school, having to begin my journey in real estate. One day, my dad shows me this video, and it's a video of this guy named Richard Taylor. Shout out Richard Taylor. And he was explaining creative financing with wholesale real estate. And to me, it sounded pretty simple. You call a couple people on Zillow, you make $10,000, and everybody's happy. Man, was I wrong. I quickly figured out that it was a longer process and it was simple but not easy. And a lot of people like to play it off as a get rich quick scheme, where you make a couple dials, you make a $10,000 fee, and you're good to go from there. But I quickly found out that this was going to take some serious work. And in order to get there, I would need to put the time into it. And what drew me to Richard Taylor's course is really you didn't need any money. All you would have to do is go to Zillow, call the agent, and say, hey, I'll give you more than what you're asking if we do it on a set of payments. So that's exactly what I did. I learned how to talk to realtors on the phone, and I would basically just make offers all day. I'd love for the story to end here. I'd love to say, hey, I just made 4 calls, got a contract, made $10,000, and I grew my wholesale business from there. But that's not how this story goes. The story is a lot longer than that because it actually took time and effort to getting my first deal. And that's exactly what you should expect getting into wholesale real estate. It takes time, it takes effort, most importantly, it takes dedication. And the only reason I say that is because if I wasn't dedicated, if I didn't stick to the program, then I wouldn't have ever gotten my first deal, and maybe I would be in college at this point. Maybe I would be doing something that I didn't want to do with my life. Okay, back to the topic. I would make calls almost every day from about 3:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. after school. I would look for specifically multifamily homes that I thought would be good for seller finance deals, and I'd try to work something out with the agent. The only issue I faced in the beginning is I wasn't good, and that's okay because I stuck to it and I got better. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is good from the beginning. Everybody has a learning curve, whether big or small. Everybody has something that they have to learn about in order to get their first deal. For me, it took me quite a while to figure out exactly how to do everything, especially creative finance, which I started out with instead of doing cash deals, which now I regret doing. Nothing wrong with creative financing. I just now prefer to try to do a cash deal first because the contracts are way easier. It's way easier to present to a seller, so on and so forth. There's a couple times where I got pretty close to a contract but couldn't find a buyer for it. And the reason was because I was choosing really rural markets to where there was no buyers. And my dumb thought process was if there's less people, there's less competition, but obviously there's also less buyers. Duh. So from February of this year to May of this year, I did on market only. No results. So I was also watching other videos about off market wholesaling from people like Maximilian Deer, Jerry Norton, and Zach Ginn. It was something that I really wanted to do, but there was only one issue, and that was that I didn't have any money. Let me show you what I did. PropStream, 7-day free trial, 50 free leads, Google Voice. That's literally it. I pulled a list from PropStream of failed listings, which is ironic because I was only doing on-market wholesaling before this. I had 50 numbers to call, no dialer, no nothing. I had to figure out how to comp, which is another video that I could get to, and I only had 7 days before I would get charged, which, let me remind you, I had no money. I individually dialed every single number that was on the list. There was maybe 45 numbers because some of the numbers were bad. So I went to Google Voice, dialed every single number, and I came across a gentleman in Pueblo, Colorado that wanted to sell his rental property. He wanted $175,000, and I negotiated him down to $135,000 by building a diabolical amount of rapport with this guy. And I mean talking to this guy for hours on end to become his best friend. Did I have to do that to get the deal closed? Probably not. But at this point, I had nothing to lose, which meant I also had everything to win. I forgot to mention, at this point, I was only 17, which meant that I legally wasn't allowed to sign a contract. So I had my dad sign it. The whole time I was talking to the guy, I was talking to him as my dad. I talked to him exactly how my dad would talk to him. And I sent him the contract, and everything was good to go. I did have to pay my dad $1,500 if the deal closed, so I sent him a contract, which was just a basic, simple purchase and sale agreement. He came back to me and told me that he wanted to use the Colorado standard purchase contract. And I was like, yeah, no worries. I do that contract all the time. We can use that. I looked this thing up and it's like 20 pages long. So I had ChatGPT basically tell me everything I needed to know because, again, I had no money to hire an attorney or anything like that. So I just needed to make sure that I wasn't sending my dad to jail or something. Although maybe if I did, I would have been able to keep that 1,500 bucks. All jokes aside, I was able to figure out the essentials, what I needed to get this guy to sign the contract, what I needed to put in there for my end buyer so that I could get this thing put to bed and I can make my money. In the standard Colorado contract, it says that the contract is non-assignable. Now what I could have done is went to the seller and said, hey, I've got to put an assignability clause in here that gives me the right to assign it to someone else. But I was too far along in the process to risk anything happening. So I just thought we need to double close this. That basically means that I buy the property and then same day, maybe 30 minutes later, I sell the property to my end buyer and I use pass-through funding from my end buyer that he covers my costs as well as the assignment fee. The other benefit of that is the end buyer doesn't see my assignment fee, so he doesn't see how much I'm making, and neither does the seller because I'm buying the property and I own it now, but only for like a half hour. I got the contract signed. I had 45 days to close, and I didn't have an inspection period, which meant that I had 45 days to also come and look at the property, which was nice. That's not typical at all, and if I wasn't so confident that I could sell this deal, I would have put an inspection period in there and not wasted this guy's time, but I knew that I was going to get this sold. I know I had a great property to sell, and I knew that someone was going to bite. After the contract was signed, I sent it to the title company, which I found by just calling all the title companies in the area and just asked them if they work with wholesale transactions. One title company said that they did, which eventually later on would be a big mistake of using them, but for this deal it was okay. Sent it to them, had them do all the paperwork. Next step, finding a buyer. I have no idea how to sell this deal. I'm searching on YouTube, seeing what I can do, and I come across Zillow, which I can just call all of the rentals and say, hey, are you looking for any more rentals? I've got a rental myself, and I'm seeing if you'd like to buy it. Called all the rentals in Pueblo and in Colorado Springs, no luck. Then I made a Facebook account. I didn't have a Facebook account at the time because Facebook is for 50-year-old moms. Just kidding. Kinda. I contacted a whole bunch of people that were buyers in Facebook groups, and I just called all of them up individually. I found one guy that was interested. He lived in Colorado Springs, and he was looking for a rental that eventually he could turn into a fix and flip. The thing that was so valuable about my property is that it was a main house, and there was also an accessory dwelling unit, which is kind of like a mother-in-law suite. Both were rented out, and it was bringing in about $1,600 a month total. So if you use the 1% rule, which is the rent has to be 1% of the purchase price, that meant I could sell this property for about $160,000. But I also thought that there was a little more upside as a fix and flip, so I marketed it at 185, hoping that I could make $50,000. Again, I'm very new to this, didn't know how to run any numbers, so it was just a shot in the dark. So I told the guy 185, he said no, and I said, okay, have a good day. But I knew this guy wanted the property. He calls me back 20 minutes later and he said, hey Jesse, I can do it if you're at 150. I was at 185, he was at 125, which is $10,000 under what I was at, and he wanted to be at 155, which at that point would give me $15,000. But I knew this guy wasn't going to give me his best number first, so I said, meet me at 155 and you've got a deal. From there, I sent him the purchase agreement and he signed it. But he also had an inspection period in his contract, which meant that he was able to have a certain amount of time before he could back out without losing any earnest money. But I told him there's tenants in there and it might tick off the tenants if you go over there, so maybe I can go over there and take pictures for you. He said that's fine as long as they're in-depth photos and that he can really get a gauge of what the condition is. I drove over there with my friend, took about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and I said, hey, my son is going to go take pictures of the property, again, acting like my dad. I know, I'm all over the place. But remember, no flippin' secrets. I went over there, took a boatload of pictures, took videos as well, and sent them to the guy, and it was exactly the condition that I told him it was in, so he was cool with it. He didn't want to renegotiate the price or anything. We were basically good to go. Then he's going to his insurance company, which was State Farm, and he was trying to get insurance for the property once he bought it. And he asked me, hey, what type of wiring does this property have? And I said, I have no idea. I didn't even know that there's other types of wiring that you can put in the electrical. He said, just make sure it's not knob and tube wiring or else I can't get insured with that. I asked the seller, hey, what wiring is in the house? And he tells me, knob and tube wiring. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if this guy cannot get insured, then this deal will not close. I call a buddy of mine who's an electrician and I asked him, hey, how much would it cost to get everything, what's called Captain Pigtailed, getting all the knob and tube wiring out? And he told me it's probably going to cost about $10,000 or $15,000 in order to get all the new wiring in there. This changes everything. I asked the seller, I said, hey, is there any way that you can look in the house and see if all of this wiring is Captain Pigtailed? If it isn't, then I can't buy this house. He said, let me see what I can do. He went over there, showed me the new electrical panel, and showed me all of the wiring was Captain Pigtailed. Thank God. Again, I consulted with an electrician friend of mine, and he said, it's all good, we're all good to go, you don't need to do anything else. I reassured the buyer, and we're good to move forward towards closing. And now that I'm thinking about it, this whole situation happened about a week before closing. And I was on vacation with my dad in Miami. The day after we got back from Miami, my dad went over to the title company, which was about an hour and a half away from us, and he signed all the papers in person. About a day or two later, I got the wire in, and I made $20,000. Bought for $135, sold at $155. The seller was happy, the buyer was happy, I was happy. It was a win-win-win. And that's really what's important in wholesaling real estate, is making sure that everybody wins. If the seller would have been unhappy, then closing would have been a disaster. Maybe he doesn't sign the paperwork. If the buyer was unhappy, I could never use him again for future deals. If I'm unhappy, obviously, I go through all the trouble and I don't make what I want to, or maybe I'm just unsatisfied with the deal. But everybody was happy, which again is all that mattered. From that point on, I bought a car, a used car for $1,500, got insurance, obviously paid my dad, and I had to roll all that money back into marketing, which I can go in depth about in my next video where I can lay out everything that I did with the money, how I got my second deal, so on and so forth. But I'll leave it here. That is exactly how I made $20,000 fresh out of high school. No money, no license, just hard work and dedication. If I would have used money, would I have gotten a deal faster? Probably, but I didn't have any money. But I did have time, which is what I used. Did I get lucky only calling 50 people and getting a deal? Yeah, probably. But I showed up every day. And if you think it's only luck, then if you show up every single day, then you're bound to get lucky. But it's not luck. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's devotion. If you're constantly determined to get a deal, eventually you will get a deal. It took me 4 months to get a deal. From February, when I learned about wholesaling real estate, to June, when I finally closed my deal. And that's what I want you to take away from this video, is it's not something that you can do very quickly and make a ton of money, at least when you're starting. The more you do it, the lighter the tool feels in your hand, which makes the whole job easier, which means you could get deals faster. But again, it's a learning process, and everybody goes through a learning curve in the beginning. Little editor's note, I'd like to give a big shout out to Maximilian Deer. He's been pushing me to make this YouTube channel, so this is my start. Thank you, Max. I appreciate it, bro. you're a G. I'll leave his channel down in the description. You could check him out. He's been my mentor through all of this, basically. But that is it for today's video. If you liked the video, make sure you leave me a like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 15 followers by the end of the week. Maybe I'll get some better lighting next time. I know the lighting's horrible. But until I see you guys next time, this is Jesse with No Flippin' Secrets. Peace!